Picture a dressing room. Now fill it with secrets. Not the romantic kind. Not love letters or hidden diamonds. The other kind. The kind wrapped in wax paper at the back of a drawer. The kind purchased at the chemist shop with your eyes down and your voice low, pretending you're buying cough syrup. The kind that leaves your skin red and raw and faintly chemical smelling for 3 days. Add to that the smell of warm pomade, cold cream, and something sharp and alkaline underneath it, all that no amount of floral perfume can fully mask. Add the sound of water heating in a basin, the scratch of a pumice stone on skin, the hiss of breath held against pain. That's the Victorian dressing room, the most private space in the most private century in history, a place where women spent hours every single day managing the one thing they were never, ever supposed to talk about: body hair. And when I say never supposed to talk about, I need you to understand what that actually means in 1882 London. This isn't just polite company avoids the subject. This is a civilization that had built an entire architecture of silence around female bodies. That had developed a vocabulary of hints and allusions and euphemisms so elaborate that a woman could communicate complete desperation to her chemist without ever saying a single direct word. The chemist would understand. She would understand. The transaction would be completed with complete mutual comprehension, and neither party would have said anything directly at all. Body hair on women wasn't just considered unfeminine, it was considered evidence of something worse, evidence of animality, of being closer to the apes than to the angels, of being, in some fundamental way, more primitive than the delicate creature a Victorian woman was supposed to be. Charles Darwin had published The Descent of Man 11 years before our story begins. 11 years in which polite society had been quietly panicking about what human body hair actually meant, about what it said about evolution, about what it said about anyone who had more of it than average. The chapter on human hair loss, the gradual shedding of our ancestral coat over evolutionary time, had been received in drawing rooms across England with a particular kind of horror. Because what Darwin was saying, between the careful scientific lines, was that body hair was a remnant, an atavism, a throwback to something earlier and less civilized, and the conclusion respectable Victorian culture had reached was straightforward and brutal. Body hair on women was evidence of evolutionary backsliding, of a failure to be fully human, fully English, fully correct, of something shameful and animal and wrong, and so women dealt with it, in silence, in private, with tools that range from mildly painful to genuinely dangerous, with creams that contained caustic soda, with bandages ripped from sensitive skin, with pumice stones worked in circles before dawn in rooms where no candle burned, where the only sound was the scratch of stone on skin and the distant bells of churches calling the city to its first prayers. They dealt with it, and they never mentioned it. And in the morning they emerged from their dressing rooms looking smooth and soft and perfectly composed, as though the whole business had never happened. I make these history stories, and honestly, most of you have probably never thought once about Victorian body hair, which is fair. Neither did most Victorians, at least not out loud. But tonight we're going into that dressing room with you. We're pulling open the locked drawer. We're going to smell the guru's cream and feel the tweezers and understand, at the level of skin and muscle and social terror, what it meant to be a woman in 1882 who had a body that didn't quite comply with what the century required. So get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. There's a half second where you don't know where you are. where the sounds don't make sense yet. Then it assembles itself, piece by piece, the way the world always does just before dawn. The smell hits you first. The attic smells of dust and damp wool, and the particular staleness of a room that holds too many sleeping people and not enough windows. Below that, faintly, the coal smoke that never quite leaves any room in London, ever, even up here on the 4th floor where the servants sleep. And underneath everything, the smell that is just the smell of yourself, of your own body after a night under a thin blanket in a room without a fire. Not the chemical smell of the dressing room, not lavender water or almond cream, just the plain, honest smell of a person. You're not alone in this room. You share it with Agnes, who is a parlour maid and who snores with an enthusiasm that borders on impressive, and with Mary, who is the between maid and who is so young she still cries into her pillow at night sometimes, though she thinks nobody can hear. You can hear. You've learned not to mention it. Your name is Clara Holt. You're 22 years old. You've been in service for 7 years, the last 3 of them here in Belgrave Square, in the household of Sir Edward and Lady Ashworth. You are a lady's maid. That means you are responsible for exactly one person in this household, and that person is Lady Ashworth. Her clothes, her hair, her jewels, her schedule, her correspondence, her moods, and her secrets. Every woman in 1882 London has secrets. The particular secrets that live in the dressing room, that require a locked drawer and a small bottle of something chemical from the chemist's shop, and that are never, ever discussed. You know all of Lady Ashworth's, and she knows you know. This is the arrangement, the unspoken understanding between a lady and her maid. I trust you with everything I am. You carry it, and you bury it, and you take it to your grave. In return, you get steady wages and a dry room and 3 meals a day and the privilege of existing at the absolute edge of a world far above your station. The church bells are already ringing somewhere out in the city. You count them automatically without quite waking all the way up. 5 o'clock in the morning, which means you have approximately 45 minutes before Lady Ashworth rings for you. 45 minutes. You use them. You don't light a candle. You know this room well enough to navigate it in darkness. The basin is against the wall. The water in it is cold, deeply, shockingly cold, the kind that contracts your chest when you bring your cupped hands to your face, but you wash anyway. Face, neck, hands. You splash some under your arms. The cold makes you gasp quietly into the dark. Agnes doesn't stir. Agnes could sleep through a cavalry charge. You dry yourself with the rough linen towel that hangs on the nail by the basin, and then you reach under your cot to find the small box. It's a cardboard box about the size of a book, wrapped in a piece of brown paper. Inside it, a pumice stone, worn smooth on one side from use. A small jar of petroleum jelly, a pair of tweezers, silver-handled, bought second-hand from a woman who'd gone into service in another house and needed the money, a pot of something else, something in a white ceramic container with a paper label that reads Gourod's Oriental Cream in looping letters. This is your kit. Every woman in service has some version of it. Or if they don't, they're managing somehow differently, with nothing, with prayers, with the desperate pretense that if they ignore it, nobody will notice. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong. The hair on your forearms is dark and noticeable against skin that's paler than average. Not extraordinary, not the kind of thing that would be remarked upon if you were a seamstress or a factory worker, or anyone whose arms were not required to be visible in proximity to people who notice such things. But you are a lady's maid. Your arms are visible every day, close to a woman who has opinions about presentation, and that woman's guests have opinions too. And those opinions travel, the way opinions in Belgravia always travel, in quiet observations and raised eyebrows and the specific type of comment that isn't quite a comment, the kind that sounds like nothing and means everything. Clara, isn't it rather warm for long sleeves? You sat with that question for 3 days after Mrs. Pemberton, Lady Ashworth's closest friend, said it 2 summers ago. You turned it over in your head at night, the way she'd looked at your wrists, the slight pause before she returned to her conversation. After that, you started using the pumice stone on your forearms, twice a week, in the cold attic in the dark before anyone else woke up. You're doing it now. Sitting on the edge of your cot, the stone in your right hand, working it in small circles over the left forearm. The sensation is between scratching an itch and being gently scraped by something rough. Not quite painful, not quite pleasant. The stone catches and releases, catches and releases. Your skin goes from cool to slightly warm under the friction, the way stone and skin always do when they've been at it long enough. You work from the wrist upward to just below the elbow, then back down. The hair doesn't disappear, not entirely. A pumice stone isn't a razor. It weakens the hair, breaks it off at the surface, leaves the skin smoother for a few days before the stubble returns, finer and softer than before. Some women swear by it for the face too, on the lip, on the chin. The thought makes you wince. The skin there is so much thinner. You know women who've done it and gone red and raw for a week, who've worn scarves in summer and told people they were cold? You've been lucky in that regard. Your facial hair is fine enough to be invisible in ordinary light. You check it every morning in the small mirror, more of a vanity mirror really, cracked at one corner, that lives under the cot alongside the box. You angle it toward the thin grey light coming through the gap in the curtains. Nothing visible. Good. That won't be true for everyone today. You put the pumice stone away. You apply the petroleum jelly to your forearms where the skin is pink and slightly irritated. It soaks in slowly, cooling the flush, catching the faint blue light from the window. Then you open the guru's cream, dip 2 fingers in and apply it to the very faint shadow above your upper lip. More preventive than necessary, but you've been using it for 2 years and the habit is strong. The guru smells of almonds and something metallic underneath. The label claims it removes superfluous hair and impurities. The chemist who sold it to you the first time didn't meet your eyes. Neither did you meet his. You leave it on while you dress. Grey wool dress, clean but old, the one you wear in the mornings before Lady Ashworth is properly up. White apron, hair pinned up. You're quick at this, practice of years. Collar straight, cuffs buttoned. You wipe the gurords off with the edge of your towel before you leave the room. Agnes is still snoring. Mary has turned over in her sleep, pressed her face against the wall. You pick up the box, slide it back under the cot. Nobody asks about the box. This is one of those understandings that runs through every house in London. Every woman in service manages something in private. You don't ask, they don't ask. The box stays under the cot and the world continues. You go downstairs. The kitchen is already warm. Mrs. Pierce, the cook, is a woman built for kitchens. Broad and efficient, with hands roughened by years of work and a temper that runs roughly parallel to the temperature. The range has been going for an hour already. The smell of coal and early bread and something savoury beginning to reduce in a pot fills the low-ceilinged room with a warmth that hits your cold face like something solid. "Morning," says Mrs. Pierce, without looking up from whatever she's doing to a piece of pastry. "Morning," you say. This is the full extent of most of your conversations with Mrs. Pierce. She respects efficiency. You respect her kitchen. You take your tea. You take the small piece of bread that's your breakfast on Lady Ashworth's early mornings. You eat it standing, leaning against the wall, watching the kitchen fill slowly with other staff. The footmen appear, looking half asleep. The scullery maid, whose name you always forget and feel guilty about, slides in through the back door smelling of cold air and the street outside. By 5:15, you're carrying a tray up the back stairs. The tray holds a pot of tea, a cup, a small pitcher of warm milk, 2 thin slices of toast in a silver rack, and a covered dish with a curl of butter. This is Lady Ashworth's morning tray. The same items, every morning, except on Tuesdays when there's a small pot of marmalade because Lady Ashworth likes marmalade on Tuesdays, and no one has ever established why. Today is Thursday. No marmalade. You stop outside Lady Ashworth's bedroom door, settle the tray on your hip, and knock with 2 fingers. Soft, precise. Come. The room is warm, warmer than anything in the house, because Lady Ashworth has a small fire kept going even through the night from October through April. The curtains are heavy, wool-lined, pulled completely shut. The room smells of lavender and something warmer underneath, the particular smell of a person waking, of warm breath and warm skin and the residue of the cold cream she applies before sleep. Lady Ashworth is sitting up in her bed. She's 41 years old. She's not a beautiful woman in the conventional sense. Her features are regular but not remarkable. Her figure what the charitable would call handsome. What she is composed. Even at 5:15 in the morning, barely awake, she is composed. Her posture is correct. Her expression is controlled. She has spent 41 years developing both of these qualities, and they are now effectively structural, as much a part of her as her skeleton. Except for the small detail of the lip. You've been doing this job for 3 years. You noticed it in the first week. Lady Ashworth has a very faint, very dark growth of hair above her upper lip, in most lights, invisible. In the particular early morning light that catches from the uncovered lamp on her nightstand. Faintly, unmistakably there. She's aware that you've noticed. She's never mentioned it. You have never mentioned it. This is how you know she trusts you completely. Good morning, Clara. Good morning, my lady. A fine morning. Not too cold. This is slightly optimistic. It is December. It is London. It is approximately 4 degrees outside. But Lady Ashworth appreciates optimism in the mornings. You set the tray on the bedside table. She reaches for the tea immediately. You move around the room, opening the curtains an inch. Not all the way, not yet. The cold grey London morning light is not kind. Laying out the towels, checking that the water in the washstand is warm enough, that the soap is in its dish. This is the first part of the morning. The easy part. Lady Ashworth drinks her tea in 4 measured sips. She eats half a piece of toast. She does not speak further. When she sets the cup down, you know it's time. The usual, Clara, the usual. You go to the dressing table. The dressing table is the most important piece of furniture in any Victorian woman's life. It is, in its way, a workshop, a laboratory, a place where raw material, a woman who has just woken up, is processed into the finished product that will face the world. And in Lady Ashworth's dressing room, it is a serious piece of equipment. Mahogany with a triple mirror, the kind that shows you your face from 3 angles simultaneously. the kind where there is nowhere to hide. The surface holds a porcelain wash set, a collection of cut glass bottles containing various creams and waters and tonics in amber and pale green, a silver-backed brush and comb set engraved with her initials, a tortoiseshell hand mirror, several small ceramic pots with labels written in French, a pin cushion so covered in pins that the original fabric is barely visible, and, in the locked drawer, the only locked drawer in the dressing table, the things you're going to need right now. You have the key. Of course you have the key. You are her lady's maid. The drawer holds a small tortoiseshell case containing a pair of tweezers, a glass jar of smooth white cream, unlabelled, a soft chamois cloth, folded precisely, a small pair of scissors with curved blades, the kind sold in surgical supply shops, and a folded piece of notepaper on which, in Lady Ashworth's own hand, there is a list of things she wants from the chemist, to be communicated verbally, never in writing. You take out the tweezers and the cream. Lady Ashworth is already sitting at the dressing table. She's pinned her hair up loosely. She'll do it properly later once you've dressed her, and is looking at herself in the mirror with the particular expression of a woman conducting a professional assessment. Not vanity. Audit. The usual first, she says again. Then we'll see about the other. The other? Right. You take the chamois cloth. You dip it in the warm water from the small basin on the table. You've already added 2 drops of witch hazel, the way she prefers. And you begin. Jaw, chin, upper lip. The cloth is warm and soft, and you use it with gentle, firm strokes, cleaning the skin, slightly opening the pores. The witch hazel catches in your nostrils, sharp and clean. Lady Ashworth sits perfectly still. This is something she's trained herself to do. The way you train yourself to do anything you must do every day. By simply accepting that stillness is the most efficient approach. You lean forward with the tweezers. The hair above her lip is dark, fine, individual. Not a growth exactly, more an accumulation of things that shouldn't quite be there. 6 on the left side, perhaps 8 on the right, a few in the centre. In the mirror's light they're clear, in daylight, in a drawing room, across a dinner table. You've convinced yourself they'd be invisible. But you've also watched Lady Ashworth move in those settings with a very specific consciousness of her angles, her lighting, her distance from windows. She knows where she can stand and where she cannot. You pick up the tweezers. The first one takes about a second. A quick, precise grip and release. Lady Ashworth's upper lip tightens infinitesimally. She doesn't flinch. She's long past flinching. You work in silence. Outside the curtains, London is beginning to wake up. You can hear it. The early morning delivery carts on the square, a horse's hooves on cobblestones, the distant sound of something industrial from somewhere south of the river, the city's first grinding machinery of the day. The tweezers click softly with each use. How many? She asks. She always asks this. 12, my lady. No more than usual. A pause. There's one on the chin I noticed. You've already seen it. You navigate to it. One hair, dark, slightly coarse, at the centre of her chin. This is the one she hates most. You don't know this because she's told you. She never tells you. You know it because of the way her eyes find it in the mirror every morning before anything else. The way she touches her chin with one finger sometimes when she thinks she's alone. You remove it quickly. Done, you say. Your skin is lovely this morning. This is your job too. The accurate assessment of the result. The professional validation. Lady Ashworth has paid you, among other things, to tell her the truth about these things. She has found, over 3 years, that you do tell the truth, which is why she keeps you. She looks in the mirror. Her upper lip is faintly pink, the skin just slightly irritated where the tweezers have been. You apply the unlabelled cream, a cold cream, soothing with something herbal in it, with your fingertip, light as breath. The pink fades within minutes. She watches it fade. The arms, she says. Ah, the arms are a different matter. Lady Ashworth has a dinner tonight. A dinner at which she will be wearing a gown with short sleeves. Not short by any modern standard, but by 1882 standards, a sleeve that reaches just below the elbow, which means her forearms will be visible, which means the fine dark hair on those forearms will potentially be visible. The last time this happened, musical evening at the Palmer's house in October, she'd noticed Mrs. Hargreaves looking at her arm. Lady Ashworth had told you about it afterward. Not in those words. She'd said, "I think we need to attend more carefully to my arms for these occasions." But you'd understood. Mrs. Hargreaves, who had been at school with Lady Ashworth, who'd always had arms like a sculpture, who would know the difference? You go back to the locked drawer. The jar of white cream is here. Different from the cold cream. This one has a different consistency. Thicker, slightly gritty. And the smell is definitive and chemical. Something alkaline underneath the floral fragrance they've used to try to mask it. An attempt at roses that keeps meeting the underlying reality halfway and failing. This is a depilatory cream. A genuine one. Not the gentle gauds you use on your own lip. A preparation from a pharmacy in Wigmore Street. Not your local chemist. A different one, further away, where the staff don't know Lady Ashworth's face. The label on this one says simply, depilatory preparation in typed letters. No brand name. The man at the pharmacy had written out the instructions on a separate piece of paper, which Lady Ashworth has since destroyed. You know the instructions by heart anyway. You've done this 6 times. Apply in a thin layer. Leave for no more than 8 minutes. Remove with a damp cloth. Not rubbing. Lifting. Apply the soothing cream immediately. No more than 8 minutes. This is important. The preparation contains caustic soda, and caustic soda will, if left too long, stop treating the hair follicle and start treating the skin. The mechanism is not complicated. The alkaline preparation breaks down the protein in the hair shaft, dissolves it at the surface, but skin is protein too. The margin between the hair being dissolved and the skin beginning to be affected is small. You've been told this explicitly by the man at the pharmacy, which is the closest anyone has come to saying it plainly to you. You've seen the result of the 8-minute limit being exceeded once, on a woman you knew who'd been too impatient and waited 10 minutes. She'd worn long gloves for a fortnight. You take a small wooden spatula and begin applying the cream to Lady Ashworth's left forearm. Lady Ashworth holds it steady, extended over the dressing table cloth so nothing drips onto the silk. The smell is immediate. Alkaline, chemical, faintly metallic. It fills the close warm air of the dressing room and sits there. This smell that has no pleasant associations, that is simply functional and unavoidable and real. Lady Ashworth doesn't react to the smell. Neither do you. The cream goes on pale and thick. You work quickly, covering the arm from wrist to elbow, then wrapping a piece of soft linen around it loosely to hold the preparation in place and trap a little warmth. Then you move to the right arm. Did you hear, Lady Ashworth says, while you're working about the Davison girl? You have not, but you'll hear about it now. She made the most extraordinary scene at the Worthingtons Wednesday evening, completely undone. She pauses. Poor thing. The way Lady Ashworth says poor thing contains a very precise amount of sympathy. Enough to be kind, not enough to preclude a certain something underneath. You've learned to decode these shadings over 3 years. Undone how, my lady? One of the gentlemen, Forbes I think, the one with the unfortunate chin, apparently made a remark about her arms, a beat. You keep your hand steady. You apply the linen wrap to the right arm. A remark, you repeat, about the visibility of certain things. Through her gloves, apparently. Some hair on the wrists. He whispered something to Patterson, but someone overheard. Lady Ashworth's voice is entirely flat, factual, as though she's reporting on the weather in another city. Miss Davison had to excuse herself. That's very unkind, you say. Yes, says Lady Ashworth. And then, check the time, Clara. You check the small clock on the dressing table. 3 minutes on the left arm. You have 5 minutes to think about Miss Davison excusing herself from the Worthingtons' drawing room. Miss Davison, who is, you think, 23, and has what you recall as a pleasant face and a tendency to hold her wrists slightly inward when in company, which you'd noticed once at a gathering, and now understand completely differently. She wasn't being shy. She was managing geometry. You wonder if she has a lady's maid. Probably not. Her family isn't quite that level. She manages herself. You wonder what with, and whether someone told her, or whether she arrived at her methods through trial and error and private humiliation. Time, says Lady Ashworth. 6 minutes, my lady. 2 more? 2 minutes. Lady Ashworth is very still. The chemical smell hangs in the air between you, and beneath it, beneath the lavender and the coal smoke and the cold cream, you can just catch the first hint of something different. The slight organic smell of hair releasing from follicle. You've learned to recognize it. It means the preparation is working. The Davison family, Lady Ashworth says, will find it very difficult to place that girl now. She doesn't say anything more about that. She doesn't need to. Time, you say. 8 minutes. You remove the linen wrappings carefully. The cream comes away, bringing with it a faint residue. The removed hair, barely visible, just a slight darkening of the white cream. You wipe with the damp cloth, lifting, never rubbing, working from wrist to elbow on both arms. The skin underneath is faintly pink, smooth. You apply the soothing cream immediately. Both arms, light, careful strokes. Lady Ashworth lifts her arms and examines them in the triple mirror, turns them slightly. Her reflection examines her reflection's arms. Good, she says. Just that. Good. It's enough. You put everything back in the locked drawer and turn the key. This, you understand, is what it means to be trusted. Not the secret she tells you. What it means to be trusted is this. These secrets she doesn't need to explain. The things she knows you know, and know you'll keep. The locked drawer and the chemical smell and the 12 hairs counted aloud. I think the blue-watered silk tonight, Lady Ashworth says. We'll start with hair after breakfast. You go to fetch the blue-watered silk from the press. Downstairs the house is fully waking up. You can hear the sounds of it. Footsteps on the back stairs, a door somewhere closing firmly, the distant rattle of the coal scuttle in the dining room where one of the footmen is tending the fire, the particular percussion of a Victorian household in its morning routines. You carry the dress carefully, laid over your arms like something precious, which it is. Blue-watered silk with jet bead trimming, made by a dressmaker in Bond Street, costs more than your wages for 4 months. You don't think about that. You've trained yourself not to think about that. In the kitchen, while Lady Ashworth breakfasts in her room, she rarely comes down before 9:30 on days without appointments. You eat your own proper breakfast. Oatmeal today. Mrs. Pearce does oatmeal on Thursdays, and it is substantial and filling, and you eat it quickly because there's work to do. Agnes sits across from you, working through her own bowl with the focused attention she brings to everything involving food. Long day, she asks without looking up. Agnes has some kind of perceptual system that operates entirely outside of direct observation. Dinner tonight. Full preparation. Agnes makes a sympathetic noise. Ours too. The gentlemen are coming back from the club at 11, so the whole front of the house needs doing. She looks up briefly. You hear about what happened at the Morrisons last week? No, the new parlour maid, the one they took on from Manchester, turned up to serve at table with... Agnes glances toward Mrs. Pearce, lowers her voice, hair on her arms, visible, right through the gauze of her cap sleeves. You eat your oatmeal. Mr. Morrison didn't notice, or pretended not to. But Mrs. Morrison said something to the housekeeper. She's been put on kitchen duties now. You eat your oatmeal. Not her fault, Agnes says, returning to her own bowl. Not everyone knows. Coming from Manchester. Not everyone knows. This is the thing about being a woman in 1882. There are things you're supposed to know. How to present yourself, how to manage your appearance, how to navigate the invisible and unspoken rules of visibility and propriety. And nobody tells you these things. Nobody writes them down. Nobody gives you a list. No school teaches it. No book contains it. You're supposed to absorb them from other women, from observation, from the consequences of getting it wrong. The parlour maid from Manchester got it wrong because nobody told her. Nobody would have told her, certainly not Mrs. Morrison, who would have considered it beneath her to discuss such things with a servant. Not the housekeeper, who perhaps didn't think of it. Not the other staff, who either didn't know themselves or assumed she did. She came from Manchester. She served at table. Her arms were visible through her sleeves, and now she's in the kitchen, where the sleeves don't matter, where nobody is examining her, where her body is her own business at last. You finish your oatmeal and go back upstairs. The morning passes in the way that mornings in a lady's maid's life always pass, in layers, in accumulated small actions, each one small, the whole of them enormous. You dress Lady Ashworth's hair. This is the longest single task of the morning. She wants a chignon today, formal for the evening, but capable of being adapted through the day without being entirely redone. You work with the hot tongs, carefully from the back of her neck upward. The smell of hair against hot metal fills the dressing room, a particular smell, dry and slightly acrid, that you associate entirely with this room and this task. The texture of the rolls under your fingers, the slight weight of each section as you wind it. Lady Ashworth sits perfectly still, reading a letter that arrived with the morning post, her eyes moving across the page while your hands work above and around her. While you work, you think about what Agnes said. Not everyone knows. And the truth is, the rules of body hair in 1882 London are not simple. They're not even consistent. They depend on who you are and what you are and where you are and what you're wearing and who's looking and what kind of light the room has, and a dozen other variables that nobody has ever put into writing. A working-class woman, a factory girl, a laundress, a market seller, is not subject to the same scrutiny as a woman in service. Nobody examines her forearms. Nobody expects her to have smooth arms and a depilatory cream in a locked drawer. Her body is her own business, more or less, and if she has hair on her arms, well, she has hair on her arms, and the cotton mills are not particularly concerned with it. A woman in service, like you, like Agnes, like the parlour maid from Manchester, exists at a strange middle point. She must present herself as respectable, as capable of blending into the background of a house where genteel people move. She must be invisible in the way that all good servants are invisible, and part of invisibility is not giving anyone anything to notice. Hair on the arms gives people something to notice. And then there are women like Lady Ashworth, women of the upper middle and upper classes who exist entirely within a world of looking and being looked at. Their bodies are a kind of text, constantly read and interpreted by everyone around them. Their skin must be correct, their deportment, their hair, their hands, especially their hands, those visible extremities that must emerge from evening gloves at the dinner table and be smooth and white and unmarked by any visible evidence of the animal body beneath. You finish the chignon. The result is neat and formal, the way Lady Ashworth prefers for dinners. She turns her head slightly, examining it in the triple mirror. That pin there, she says, touching a point at the back. You adjust the pin. Better, she says. You begin with the blue-watered silk. Dressing a Victorian woman is not a casual operation. You start with the corset. Lady Ashworth is already wearing her morning corset, but the evening one is different, stiffer, with a different silhouette. She holds the bedpost while you lace it from the bottom up, working steadily upward through the crossed lacing, each pull deliberate and measured. She doesn't ask for a severe lacing. She wants support, structure, the correct foundation for the dress, not the waist reduction that some women pursue to the point of genuine danger. You've worked for women who did insist on it, who wanted their waists so reduced that breathing became a secondary activity, and the experience was unpleasant for everyone. Lady Ashworth is not interested in waist reduction at the expense of consciousness. The evening corset is boned with whalebone, covered in pale satin. When you've laced it and tied off the ends, Lady Ashworth's breathing shifts, slightly more controlled, slightly more deliberate, her ribs working within the new parameters of the boning. This is normal. This is the body adjusting. She does it every evening and she barely notices anymore. The cage crinoline, small, the fashion has been moving away from large crinolines for years now. The silhouette elongating and narrowing into the bustle. Then the multiple petticoats, each one adding weight and warmth and the particular rustling sound that is the sound of a Victorian woman in motion. Then the dress itself, lowered over her head with great care, the silk catching the light as it settles, the jet bead trimming at the sleeves catching the morning light from the window. The sleeves. You help Lady Ashworth's smooth, chemically treated arms into the sleeves of the dress, and you both look in the mirror at the result. The silk falls just below the elbow. Her forearms are visible. They are smooth. They are pale. The morning's treatment has done its work. In the right light, at the right distance. She could be a marble statue of herself. That is the goal. That has always been the goal. Gloves, she says. Full-length evening gloves, white kid reaching above the elbow. For the dinner they'll come off at the table. It's not done to eat in gloves, but they'll be on for the arrival, for the drawing room beforehand. She extends her arm. You smooth the glove up over her elbow, working out the air with your fingers, making sure there are no wrinkles. The leather is cool and slightly stiff at first, then warming against her skin. She flexes her fingers. Perfect, she says, and she means the gloves. But she also means the arms under the gloves. She means the morning's work. The tweezers and the cream and the 8 careful minutes and the cool chamois cloth and the counting. She means all of it. You help her with a necklace, jet beads matching the dress, clasp at the back, small fiddly clasp that takes both your hands and your full concentration. Jet is Victorian mourning jewellery that has leaked out of mourning into ordinary fashion. The Victorians had a remarkable talent for making grief decorative, for taking the fact of death and turning it into an aesthetic system. She stands in the mirror at 8:05 and examines herself. The woman in the mirror is 41 years old. She has spent years building the tools and the habits and the trusted staff that allow her to be, in public, precisely what Victorian society requires her to be. She has spent money she doesn't like to think about on preparations that cannot be named. She has spent uncountable mornings sitting in a velvet chair in a cold dressing room while you counted hairs and worked tweezers with careful precision. And the woman in the mirror shows none of this. The woman in the mirror is composed and smooth and cool. Her arms are bare below the elbow and the skin is pale and unmarked. She is correct in every particular that can be seen. The carriage is waiting. "You've done well, Clara," she says. She does not often say this. "Thank you, my lady." She goes downstairs. You go back to the attic. You eat the cold supper Mrs. Pierce has left on a plate for you, bread and cheese and a pickled onion. And you sit by the small window and watch the square outside. The evening is clear and cold. The gas lamps cast orange pools on the wet cobblestones. Somewhere across the square, carriages arriving at another house. The sound of wheels and voices and the jingle of harness. The evening's social machinery in motion. You think about the dinner Lady Ashworth has gone to. The table full of people who will see each other's arms and necklines and faces and hands, and who will make, as they always make, the small invisible assessments that constitute social life in this city. The reading of surfaces, the interpretations of what is presented. You think about what goes into the surfaces, the work beneath the presentation. You think about this more than you probably should. It's an occupational difficulty, you suppose. When your work is the gap between the person and the presentation, you can't help but think about the gap, about how large it is, about what it contains in this house alone, on this evening, 3 shillings and 4pence from Toft and Sons, 8 minutes of alkaline chemistry on 2 forearms, 12 hairs counted aloud. The Tuesday appointments with Mrs. Flanagan, whose black bag you've never looked inside. The pumice stone working in the dark at 5 o'clock. All of it vanished now into the completed surface of the woman in the carriage. You finish your bread and cheese and go to bed. Agnes is already asleep. Agnes is always already asleep by the time you come up. It is one of Agnes's many reliable qualities. You take off your dress and your petticoats and hang them on the hook on the back of the door. Your stays you leave on. It's too cold to sleep without them. The room is barely above freezing, and the extra layer is practical. You pull the thin blanket up to your chin. The box is under the cot. The pumice stone and the tweezers and the Gouraud's cream and the petroleum jelly. Tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock, you'll take the stone out again. The same as this morning. The same as every morning. Outside, London is going about its nighttime business. The carriages returning from dinners, the later wagons coming in from the countryside, the sounds of it all, familiar and constant as breathing. You close your eyes, and then you think about a woman you've never met. You think about her often, actually. She's not a real woman, not a specific person, but a composite built from everything you know. She's a woman somewhere in London tonight, in a room without a fire, with no chemist's parcel in her drawer, with no locked drawer, with no lady's maid to do in 2 minutes what takes her 20. She has hair on her arms and possibly on her face, and she's attending to it with whatever she has. A knife she sharpened on the windowsill, or a method she's heard about from another woman, or nothing. Because she doesn't have time or money, or the knowledge that management is even possible. She exists somewhere in the web of this city. She is a seamstress or a factory worker or a charwoman or a shop girl. She's going to work tomorrow morning, and her farms will be visible, and possibly they will not matter, because nobody at her level is scrutinizing her forearms, and possibly they will matter very much because someone always finds something to scrutinize. She doesn't have a locked drawer. She doesn't have a lady's maid. She has what she has, and she manages with it. Or she doesn't manage, and the world observes the results and forms its opinions and says nothing directly, because saying nothing directly is the whole system. The system maintains itself through silence. You've been part of the system for 5 years. You're good at your part. Somewhere in the city, across all those rooftops, Lady Ashworth is at a dinner table. Her arms are smooth. Her lip is smooth. She is composed and correct, and the work of the morning is invisible in exactly the way it is meant to be invisible. That is the goal. That has always been the goal. You fall asleep thinking about it. The days accumulate. It's February now, and the frost has been savage. The kind that arrives in the night and transforms every surface by morning. The iron railings in the square crusted white. The cobblestones glazed and treacherous. The breath of every person and horse in London visible as small clouds in the air, the kind of cold that finds every gap in your wool coat and sits there smug. Lady Ashworth has a problem, not a crisis, not yet. But a problem which she communicates to you in the particular way she communicates problems. Without saying directly what the problem is, she describes instead the circumstances surrounding it, and you're expected to understand and produce a solution. The circumstances. Her sister, Mrs. Aldridge, is coming to stay for a fortnight. Mrs. Aldridge is coming from Edinburgh, where her husband is in law, and where she has not been in London's social world for 3 years. She will be attending social engagements alongside Lady Ashworth. She will be visible in a world that will be new to her again, that will be measuring her against its current standards. Mrs. Aldridge has, and this is the closest Lady Ashworth comes to saying it directly, always struggled with certain complexion matters. More than I have. You understand immediately Mrs. Aldridge's face. You haven't met Mrs. Aldridge, but you've seen the miniature portrait that sits on Lady Ashworth's writing desk, a painting of a woman perhaps 5 years older than Lady Ashworth, broader featured, with the colouring that in the portrait looks dramatic and rich. Dark hair, dark eyes, a complexion that suggests, and in the miniature you can't be certain, but you can read implications into pigment, a predisposition toward the same issue that Lady Ashworth manages, but more pronounced. Lady Ashworth is asking you, without asking you, to manage her sister. I wonder if you might, Lady Ashworth says one morning, studying a piece of correspondence. When Cecily arrives, Mrs. Aldridge, make yourself available to her. She has a girl, but the girl is quite inexperienced. Of course, my lady, I'd like her to be comfortable here. I'd like her to feel that everything is well in hand. Of course. Lady Ashworth pauses. She finds London somewhat fatiguing. The attentiveness of it, that's what she calls it. The attentiveness, the constant examination, the watching. London watches, And Edinburgh watches too, but Edinburgh watches at a slightly different range, with slightly different instruments. I'll make sure Mrs. Aldridge has everything she needs, you say. Lady Ashworth puts down the correspondence. She looks at you with the expression she uses when she's about to say something that requires a degree of formality to maintain the correct distance. I know I can trust your discretion, she says. You always can, my lady. A beat. Cecily is very proud, more proud than is perhaps always useful. You receive this information and store it where you store all information, in the part of yourself that doesn't show, that keeps things in the dark, that knows everything and tells no one. I'll be careful of that, you say. Mrs. Aldridge arrives on a Thursday in a hired carriage from King's Cross, with a mountain of luggage and a maid who is, as Lady Ashworth predicted, very young and very clearly overwhelmed. She is also, and you see this immediately, in the way you've trained yourself to see these things without looking as though you're looking. Nothing like the miniature portrait in any way that matters. The miniature showed a composed woman. The woman who comes through the door of the Belgrave Square house is composed on the surface, erect, well-dressed, voice-controlled, but underneath, in the slight tightness of her expression, the careful way she holds her head, there is the very specific tension of someone who has been watching herself for the duration of a 10-hour journey and is exhausted by it. She's wearing a heavy travelling veil, which is not unusual for winter travel, for a long train journey, for the dust and the cold, but she doesn't remove it immediately. When any other woman arriving from a journey would lift the veil the moment she was inside in the warmth, relieved of her hat and coat, Mrs. Aldridge keeps it down for perhaps 10 minutes longer than necessary. Under the veil you can see the shape of her face, the strong jaw, the colouring. You say nothing. You take her coat. You show her to the room prepared for her. Her maid, a girl called Bessie, barely 17, from Edinburgh, with an Edinburgh accent that makes every word sound like a question, is clearly terrified of London, of the house, of the staff, of Mrs. Aldridge herself. She hovers in the doorway of the room like she's hoping to become invisible by staying very still. Bessie, you say, quietly, coming up beside her. Why don't you come with me? I'll show you where things are stored, and you can help me bring up the hot water. The girl follows you with the relieved gratitude of someone who's been thrown a rope. In the kitchen, while you wait for the water to heat, you take stock. Bessie knows almost nothing. This is the starting point. She can lay out clothes, approximately. She knows how to press with an iron, more or less. She knows very little else. She knows nothing, as far as you can tell, about what Mrs. Aldridge needs. Your mistress, you say carefully, while Mrs. Pierce moves around the kitchen pretending not to listen with the practised efficiency of a woman who has listened to everything in this kitchen for 20 years. Has she given you particular instructions about her morning routine? Bessie looks at you. She wants tea at 7, she says, and she likes the fire very hot. And her complexion, you say? Bessie blinks. She has some things in her bag, the girl says. Creams and such. She does them herself. She never let me help with that part. Of course she doesn't. Mrs. Aldridge, proud Mrs. Aldridge, manages that part herself, in private, without help, which means without someone who can tell her when she's missed something in the mirror, or when the tweezers need to be used at a different angle, or when the preparation has worked and needs to come off, without someone to look at her in the morning light and count what needs to be counted and say it plainly and get it done. I'll speak to Lady Ashworth, you say. She may want me to help Mrs. Aldridge. Would that be all right with you, Bessie, if I took on some of those duties? The girl's relief is visible. She nods rapidly. Yes, please. I don't know what to do for all that. Nor should she. She's 17. She's from Edinburgh. Nobody told her. You carry up the hot water. Mrs. Aldridge is standing at the window when you knock and enter. She's removed the veil now, and you see her face for the first time without it. The miniature was, as you suspected, generous. Mrs. Aldridge's features are strong and well-shaped, and in good light, in a good mood, she would be striking. But the miniature was painted by someone who had smoothed certain things that could not be smoothed in the ordinary light of an English winter. The dark hair is darker in person, at her upper lip, at her jaw, across her cheekbones. Fine, but not fine enough. Not invisible, not in London winter light, with London winter society's eyes at a dinner table. You put the hot water on the washstand. You arrange the towels. You don't look at Mrs. Aldridge directly, but you're aware of her awareness of you, the slight stiffening that happens when someone knows they're being assessed by someone qualified to assess them. My sister speaks very highly of you, she says. Her voice is Edinburgh, cooled into something more precise over years in professional society. Lady Ashworth is very kind, you say. A pause. She suggested you might be of some assistance to me, with my morning arrangements, if that would be helpful, Mrs. Aldridge. Another pause, this one longer. The pause of a proud woman deciding whether to allow assistance. I have my own methods, she says. I've managed perfectly well in Edinburgh. Of course. Edinburgh is... She stops, starts again. The social demands here are somewhat more intensive. They can be, you say carefully. You wait. She turns from the window, looks at you directly for the first time. My sister says you're discreet. Absolutely, Mrs. Aldridge. She says you're very good with... She makes a small gesture toward her own face, not pointing at anything specifically, just indicating a general territory. I'll do everything I can, you say. The decision is made in that moment. You can see it happen. The slight relaxation of her jaw, the half-breath she exhales. 7 o'clock, she says. Before Bessie brings the tea, I'll be here at 6:45, you say. She turns back to the window. Thank you, Clara. You've been in service long enough to know that a proud woman thanking a servant for this particular thing is significant. It costs something real. Pride costs something every time it yields. Of course, Mrs. Aldridge. 6:45, the next morning you knock at Mrs. Aldridge's door. She opens it immediately. She's been awake already. You can tell by the expression of controlled alertness she's wearing, the face of someone who hasn't quite slept and is compensating with rigidity. The room is warm, the fire going. On the dressing table, a small leather case, unzipped. Inside it, the equipment she uses herself. 2 pairs of tweezers, one standard, one with finer points. A small pot of cold cream. A bandage-like strip of what looks like silk, folded carefully. A glass jar with a paper label. This is what I use, she says. I'm aware it's... She pauses. I've heard there are better methods. There are other methods, you say carefully. Different approaches work for different people. You study the contents of the leather case without touching it. The silk strip interests you. You've heard of this. A method you know second-hand from the conversations of women who'd used it, pulled from half-heard things and descriptions in the circumspect columns of women's magazines that referred to the practice as the French method without explaining what that meant. A strip of fabric applied to the skin with a preparation of sugar and lemon, something adhesive, pressed firmly, then pulled away sharply, taking the hair with it. More efficient than tweezers for areas of coverage. More painful, too, in the way that more efficient things are often more brutal. May I? You ask, reaching for the silk strip. She nods. You unfold it carefully. It's clean and slightly stiff. The texture of something that's been used and washed many times. Very fine silk. On one side, faint traces of a brown residue. Dried caramel, essentially. Sugar-based. You make the preparation yourself, you ask. Sugar and lemon, boiled down. Mrs. Aldridge says it in a tone that communicates this is perfectly ordinary and she is perfectly comfortable with it. You heat it to the right consistency, apply it, let it set, and then... She makes a pulling gesture. You've heard this described. You've never seen it done. You've never been in a position to use it yourself. For the fine dark hair on your forearms, the pumice stone is enough, and the gauze handles your lip. But Mrs. Aldridge's situation is, as Lady Ashworth tactfully described it, more intensive. Would you like me to prepare it, you ask? Or I can work with the tweezers first and we can assess, she considers. The tweezers first, she says. You should see what we're working with. She sits at the dressing table. You stand behind her, and you both look at her reflection in the mirror. Mrs. Aldridge is looking at herself with the expression Lady Ashworth uses, the professional audit. But there is something else in Mrs. Aldridge's face that isn't in Lady Ashworth's, a different quality to the assessment, something tighter. Lady Ashworth manages, Mrs. Aldridge endures. You see the difference immediately. The hair on Mrs. Aldridge's upper lip is fine but noticeable, more than Lady Ashworth's 12 hairs, more than can be managed in a quick twice-daily check. Along her jaw, on both sides, a growth of fine dark hair that in the wrong light would read clearly to a watching eye. At her temples, finer, blending into her dark hair but present. She is dark-complexioned, dark-haired, and her hair is dark too, every hair of it. She has spent, you estimate, an enormous amount of her adult life managing this, and she has done it alone in Edinburgh, with a leather case and a silk strip, and a pride that has made the work harder than it needed to be. All right, you say. You pick up the fine-pointed tweezers. I'll start with the lip. Tell me if the pressure is wrong. She nods, her jaw set. A woman prepared for something she's accustomed to enduring. You begin. The tweezers are good, finer than yours, better quality, and the tips are sharp and well aligned. You work quickly, which is the only kindness available in this kind of work. Quick and precise, and without hesitation, because hesitation just prolongs the discomfort. Good tweezers, you say. I had them made, she says. She doesn't elaborate. You clear the upper lip. 23 hairs. You count, as you always count. You don't tell Mrs. Aldridge the number unless she asks. She doesn't ask. You move to the jaw. This takes longer. Mrs. Aldridge sits perfectly still. Occasionally her breath catches. The jaw is more sensitive than the lip, and you're working at close quarters. The tweezers at a difficult angle. But she never says stop, never flinches back. Edinburgh has made her very hard on herself. When you've done what the tweezers can do, you sit back. The sugar preparation, you say, for the jawline. The tweezers take the individual hairs, but for the areas of coverage I think it would be more effective. She looks at herself in the mirror, looks at what the tweezers have done, which is substantial but not complete. Yes, she says. I'll need to go down to the kitchen for a few minutes, you say. Sugar and lemon. 15 minutes for the preparation. She looks at you in the mirror. You go yourself, she asks. Not Bessie. I'll go myself, you say. No one needs to know what it's for. Her face does something. Only a small thing. A very small shift. "Thank you," she says again. You go downstairs. Mrs. Pierce is in the kitchen, beginning preparations for breakfast. You ask her, in passing, for a small pan, some sugar, a lemon. She gives you these without comment. In this kitchen, as in all kitchens of this level, strange requests from a lady's maid for cooking supplies are understood to be strange requests from a lady's maid for cooking supplies and not inquired into. You've never made the sugar preparation before, but you've heard it described often enough. The principle is simple, the practice is in the consistency. Sugar dissolves in water first, then you add the lemon juice, then heat it slowly until it forms a caramel that will stick. Too liquid, and it won't pull cleanly. Too thick, and it becomes brittle, and will break rather than peel, leaving residue in the hair follicle and requiring you to start again. You test it by dropping a small amount into cold water. If it forms a soft ball that holds its shape without being hard, it's right. The smell of caramelizing sugar fills the small corner of the kitchen where you're working. Sweet, warm, a little acidic from the lemon. The ordinary smell of cooking applied to an extraordinary purpose. The sugar goes dark gold, lighter than you'd want for eating, but right for this. You take it off the heat. Test. Soft ball in cold water. Right. You pour it into a small porcelain cup. Leave it to cool for a few minutes. It needs to be warm and pliable, not burning, and carry it upstairs. Back in Mrs. Aldridge's room, the light is better now. Morning has strengthened, and through the window you can see Belgrave Square in its winter morning state. Frost on the iron railings. A few people walking with the careful precision of people who don't trust the ice. Mrs. Aldridge is still at the dressing table. She has used the time to wash her face. The cold cream has been applied and removed. The skin is clean and slightly open-pored from the warmth of the room. Good, that will help. This is warm, you say, setting the cup on the table. We should use it quickly. You apply the caramel preparation to her jawline with the small spatula, working in the direction of hair growth as you've heard it must go. A thin layer, slightly thick. It sets almost immediately in the cool of the room, contracting slightly as it hardens. You can feel the slight grip of it under your fingers when you test the edge. Mrs. Aldridge watches this in the mirror with an expression of complete neutrality. Ready, you say. She nods. You get your fingers under the edge of the set caramel. It's peeled up slightly at the jaw, has a lip you can grip, and in one quick, firm motion, you pull, against the grain, away from the skin in one sharp, continuous movement. Mrs. Aldridge makes a sound, brief, controlled. Not a cry, not quite, but a sound of genuine discomfort, quickly swallowed, the sound of someone absorbing something sharp with practiced efficiency. Sorry, you say. Don't apologize, she says immediately. Did it work? You look at the strip of caramel in your hand, embedded in the underside of it, barely visible, a faint darkening. Hair. You look at her jaw, smooth. The skin red. It will fade within minutes. You'll apply the cold cream immediately. But smooth in a way the tweezers alone couldn't have achieved. It worked, you say. Something crosses Mrs. Aldridge's face. It happens quickly, and she masters it immediately, but you see it. A flicker of something large and complicated. Relief. Yes. But under it, something else. The relief of a woman who has been managing something difficult alone, in private, for years, and who has just been helped. The other side, she says. You do the other side. By the time you're finished, and the cold cream is applied, and the redness is fading, You have completed in 45 minutes what Mrs. Aldridge has been completing alone in perhaps 2 hours, reaching awkward angles with unsteady hands. She looks at herself in the mirror for a long time. You should have come to London years ago, you say. It's too familiar and you know it immediately. But she receives it the way she receives everything, with complete composure. My husband doesn't care for London, she says. A pause. That's very useful, you say, for some things. She looks at you in the mirror, and for a moment, just a moment, she almost smiles. Yes, she says, for some things. Mrs. Aldridge stays for 12 days. Each morning at 6:45 you're at her door. You work through the same process. Tweezers, then the sugar preparation, then cold cream. By the end of the first week you've developed a system for it, a rhythm, the kind that comes only from repetition. You've learned the particularities of her skin, where it reddens fastest, which angle of tweezers works best for the jaw, how warm the caramel needs to be on a cold morning versus a warm one, how to gauge the right consistency from the way it moves off the spoon. She has learned gradually to tell you things, not personal things. Mrs. Aldridge is not a personal woman, but practical things. The way she says lower on the left or one more pass, I can still feel something there. The way she communicates what she needs without asking for it, which is Edinburgh shorthand and which you've learned to decode. On the 4th morning she asks about the preparations Lady Ashworth uses. Not in those words. She says, my sister mentioned something she's found useful, a preparation. There's depilatory cream, you say. She waits. From a pharmacy in Wigmore Street, you say. I go on her behalf. I could get some for you before you leave, if you'd like. Another long pause. The ingredients? She asks. Caustic soda, mainly, you say, with some other things. It needs to be used carefully. The timing is important, she considers. Is it better than this? She gestures at the caramel setup. For larger areas, yes. For the face, I'd keep to the tweezers and the sugar. The chemical preparation is stronger than you'd want near your eyes. She receives this information like a verdict. Get me some, she says, for when I'm back in Edinburgh. You get it. You go to Toft & Sons, you purchase the depilatory preparation. You bring it back wrapped in brown paper, unlabelled. You give it to Bessie to pack in the trunk, along with the written instructions, which Mrs. Aldridge, unlike Lady Ashworth, asks you to write down. On a small piece of notepaper in your clearest hand. The timing, the method, the precautions. Bessie packs it in the trunk without reading the note. On the 12th day, Mrs. Aldridge leaves. She says goodbye to you in the hall while the footmen are loading the luggage. She gives you a folded piece of paper. 3 shillings, her own money, not given through Lady Ashworth's hands. For your trouble, she says. It was no trouble, you say. They look at each other for a moment. You're very good at what you do, Mrs. Aldridge says. It's not nothing. From a woman that proud, it costs something real. Thank you, Mrs. Aldridge. The carriage pulls away. Lady Ashworth watches it from the top step and then comes inside, and you help her off with her shawl, and neither of you mentions Mrs. Aldridge's face. The next day, you're back to the regular routine. The locked drawer, the tweezers, the morning audit. A Tuesday in March, and the woman who comes for Lady Ashworth's hands arrives at 10 o'clock. You've seen her a dozen times. Her name is Mrs. Flanagan, though you suspect this is the name she uses professionally rather than her real one. And she is a small deft woman of indeterminate age, with hands that are themselves the best advertisement for her work. She carries a black bag of the type that doctors carry, except its contents are entirely different from anything a doctor would own. She sees Lady Ashworth privately, in the dressing room with the door closed. You wait outside. 45 minutes usually. You use the time to press a bodice, sitting on the narrow chair in the corridor with a small travel iron you keep for this purpose, the iron heating on a spirit lamp, the smell of warm wool rising from the work. You've always been curious about what Mrs. Flanagan does precisely. You know the broad outlines, the knuckle hair, the wrist hair, the specific attentions required by hands that are displayed in society, that must emerge from evening gloves at dinner tables and be smooth and white and unmarked. But the specifics, the preparations she brings in the black bag, these you don't know. Lady Ashworth has never told you. Mrs. Flanagan would certainly not tell you. There are entire professions that exist to manage what cannot be discussed. Mrs. Flanagan exists, and the woman at Toft and Sons who wraps the preparations in brown paper exists, and the woman in Edinburgh who sold Mrs. Aldridge her silk strip exists, and you yourself exist in your particular function, because a whole world of women needs to manage something and cannot ask for help managing it in any direct way. The door opens. Lady Ashworth's hands, when she emerges, are exactly as they always are, smooth and pale and correct. Mrs. Flanagan follows her out with a black bag and the expression of professional neutrality. "Same time next week," says Mrs. Flanagan. "The same time," says Lady Ashworth. Mrs. Flanagan goes downstairs. You hear Mrs. Pearce giving her a cup of tea in the kitchen. This is the arrangement, same as always, the same tea and the same invisibility. You put down the iron. "My gloves need attention," Lady Ashworth says. "The left-hand pair, the pearl ones. There's a small tear at the thumb. I'll see to it." You go to find the pearl gloves. Spring comes to London incrementally the way it always does. Not all at once, not with any dramatic announcement, but in small accretions. A day that is slightly less cold. Then a morning where the light, when it comes through the attic window, is yellow instead of grey. Then a week where the trees in Belgrave Square begin the process of considering leaves, their branches softening with the very first suggestion of buds. The routines continue. 5 o'clock, pumice stone your own forearms, Gourod's cream on your lip, down to the kitchen, up to Lady Ashworth, the tweezers, the cream, the locked drawer, Toft and Sons when needed. Lady Ashworth has a new social engagement, a series of them, spring season beginning, the usual round of calls and dinners and musical evenings that constitute the upper middle class social calendar. She needs to be prepared for everyone, the arms, the lip, the hands on Tuesdays. One evening in April, a Wednesday, Lady Ashworth goes to a dinner at which she meets a woman you hear about the next morning. Not in detail, but in broad strokes which are enough. The woman's name is Mrs. Blythe. She is apparently newly arrived in London from India. Her husband is something in the civil service, just posted home after several years in Bombay. She's very dark enough that her complexion reads differently from the English women at the table. Dark and warm, and Lady Ashworth conveys this through a certain careful phrasing. Very much at home in herself. She's quite striking, Lady Ashworth says. Very confident. Doesn't seem to care much for the usual. A pause. The usual considerations. You think about this while you work. Mrs. Blythe, from India, with a dark complexion and hair that might well be darker and more visible than any English woman at the table, arriving in London and not caring about the usual considerations. Either she doesn't know about the usual considerations, which seems unlikely for a woman who's moved in society, or she knows and has decided not to comply with them, has decided somewhere between Bombay and Belgravia that the system of management and silence and locked drawers is not her system. Did she seem happy, you ask, before you've quite decided to ask it? Lady Ashworth looks at you in the mirror with a slightly different expression than usual. Not displeased, more thoughtful. She seemed, Lady Ashworth says, completely unbothered. A pause. Which was, she adds, rather remarkable, actually. You don't comment further. You complete the morning's work, but you think about Mrs. Blythe for several days. Completely unbothered. In a drawing room in April in Belgravia, surrounded by women whose morning routines begin at 5, and whose locked drawers contain 3 shillings worth of preparations from Wigmore Street, surrounded by the entire invisible machinery of Victorian self-management, completely unbothered. You wonder what that feels like. You try to imagine the weight of it. Not managing, just existing. Just being in your body without the box under the cot and the pumice stone in the dark and the careful counting of hairs in the early morning. You can't quite imagine it. You've been managing for so long that you can't find the feeling underneath. You have a morning off on the 2nd Thursday of May, and you use it to walk. You don't go anywhere in particular. Out of Belgrave Square, north through the streets of Pimlico, west toward the park. Hyde Park in May is transformed, the trees in full leaf, the paths covered in couples and families and nannies with perambulators, the whole wide green space of it opening up after the winter's grey like a promise that the city hadn't made and is now delivering. You walk for 2 hours. You walk past women of every kind. Women in carriages, glimpsed through open windows, in bonnets and gloves, and the particular posture of women who are always being looked at. Women on foot in the park, their arms visible in the warmer air, their faces turned up to the light. Women selling things from baskets, women sitting on the grass with children, their sleeves rolled to the elbow, not caring, not thinking, just warm in the sun. All of them with bodies that exist in the same world of observation and assessment, and the invisible rules that organise it all, and some of them not thinking about the rules at all. You pass a woman on the path, perhaps 40, wearing a loose walking dress of some indeterminate brown, her arms in their loose sleeves, hair slightly untidy from the wind, and she's entirely focused on the dog she's walking, on the dog's pleasure in the grass, and she's laughing at something the dog has done, and her whole face is open with it. Not managing, not assessing, just walking. You think about what you know the methods. Pumice stone, tweezers, cold cream, depilatory preparation, the sugar and lemon method, the French method, the more dangerous preparations, arsenic compounds, which you've heard about but never used, which make skin smooth but require more confidence than common sense and leave behind consequences that can take years to manifest. The hot wax preparations beginning to appear in some of the more sophisticated chemists, which are newer and said to be effective and which produce a discomfort in the accounts of women who've tried them that suggests they are both of those things. You know the economics. 3 shillings and 4pence at Toft and Sons, the pearl gloves, Mrs. Flanagan's fees which are not discussed, the cost of the Gurrell's cream, the cost of the tweezers Lady Ashworth had made. You know the class structure of it. At one end, the working women who can't spare the money or the time, who manage with whatever they have or manage without, and whose bodies exist outside the sphere of intense social examination. At the other end, women like Lady Ashworth, who have the resources and the time and the trusted staff to manage everything precisely. And in between, the enormous middle, the women who have enough money to know they're expected to manage but not quite enough to manage well, who are showing up to events like Miss Davison at the Worthingtons' drawing room, trying their best with what they have. The park is warm now, genuinely warm, the first real warmth of the year. You take off your gloves and hold your forearms up to the sunlight. Dark hair visible, fine on the skin. You haven't used the pumice stone this morning. You're off duty, it's Thursday, there's nobody here to see. Nobody whose assessment will arrive like the edge of something cold against the back of your neck. You look at your arms for a while. They're perfectly ordinary arms. You've had them your whole life. They've carried things and scrubbed things and pressed things and applied dozens of preparations to other people's skin, and underneath all the working, they're just arms. You put your gloves back on. You walk back to Belgrave Square. The thing about being a lady's maid is that you know the intimate reality of people's lives in a way that nobody else does. More intimate than a husband. A husband in 1882 does not know what happens in the dressing room before breakfast, does not know about the tweezers and the locked drawer and the 6 years of Tuesday appointments with Mrs. Flanagan. A husband sees the completed version. You see the work that makes the completed version possible. You've seen Lady Ashworth, 41 years old and composed, count 12 hairs aloud in her own mirror. You have seen Mrs. Aldridge exhale with relief when you said the sugar preparation worked. You have seen the parlour maid from Manchester sent to the kitchen because nobody told her, nobody prepared her, nobody gave her the information she needed. You have seen the chemist's assistant at Toft & Sons, 19 years old and professionally dignified, packaging 3 shillings worth of depilatory preparation in brown paper and not meeting your eyes. All of this passes through the dressing room. All of it is managed in the space between the locked drawer and the mirror, between 5 o'clock and 7:30, between the raw material of a woman waking up and the finished product she presents to the world. And none of it is spoken. In the summer, something changes. Not dramatically. Not in any way that could be identified from outside, but in the way that things change when you've been watching one person closely for a long time, in the quality of something, the texture of a habit. Lady Ashworth changes something. It takes you 3 weeks to identify what it is, and when you find it, it's this. She stopped asking for the morning count. For 3 years, every morning after the tweezers, you've said 12 or 8 or 14, the number of hairs removed. She's always acknowledged the number. It was a ritual, a measurement, a way of tracking whether things were getting better or worse, whether the methods were working, whether the situation was manageable. She stopped asking. You notice one morning that she's not going to ask, and you prepare to offer the number anyway, as you always do. The preparation for tonight, she says instead, before you can speak. I want to try the sugar method. You pause. She's never asked for the sugar method before. She's watched you use it on Mrs. Aldridge, but she's never asked for it herself. For which areas? You ask. The jaw, she says, and the arms. For Thursday. She has a dinner on Thursday at which she'll be wearing a dress with very short sleeves, shorter than anything she's worn recently, a new purchase, the fashion moving toward less coverage. Of course, you say. You go downstairs for sugar and lemon. You heat it carefully. You bring it up. Lady Ashworth sits at the dressing table and you apply the caramel to her jaw. When you pull the strip away, she makes a sound, not the compressed endurance of Mrs. Aldridge, but something slightly more surprised. The surprise of a new sensation. That's effective, she says. Yes, you say. And the arms, you can do the same. Larger area, so it takes longer, but yes. She considers herself in the mirror. Her jaw is red. It will fade, and smooth in a different way than the tweezers alone could achieve. Thursday, she says, we'll do the arms Thursday. Of course, my lady. You're cleaning the preparation from the spatula when she says, "How do you manage?" Your own. She doesn't complete the sentence, but it's the first time in 3 years she's asked about you specifically. You look up. "The pumice stone," you say, "and Goureau's for my lip. It's sufficient for what I need." She looks at you in the mirror, a direct look. "You should try the better preparation," she says, "if you'd like. You can use the dressing table. You understand the offer. She's offering you access to the locked drawer, to the Toft and Sons preparations, to Mrs. Flanagan's recommendations. This is a significant offer." "Thank you," you say. She returns to her own reflection. But something has shifted. Some small distance has closed, in the particular way that distance is close between a woman and the maid she trusts completely. After 3 years of locked drawers and counted hairs and early mornings in the cold. Not friendship. That's not what this is, and you'd be foolish to mistake it for that. But something. You use the dressing table on Saturday mornings, when Lady Ashworth has no appointments until 11. You use the Toft and Sons preparation on your forearms, carefully, with the correct timing, wiping at exactly 8 minutes. You use the fine-pointed tweezers on your lip. Your own tweezers are perfectly functional, but the fine-pointed ones are better, and it matters. The small improvement, the precision that comes with better tools. You apply the cold cream and wait for the pink to fade. You look at yourself in the triple mirror, Lady Ashworth's triple mirror, in Lady Ashworth's dressing room, in Lady Ashworth's house. This is not your life. This will not be your life. You will not grow old in this house. Will not spend another 20 years in this dressing room. Some day you'll leave. Get married, maybe, if someone suitable appears. Or leave service for something else. You've heard of women who've left service as a lady's maid and set themselves up doing essentially what you do, but privately, as Mrs. Flanagan does, going to houses with their black bags and managing what needs managing. There might be something in that. You wipe the preparation off with the chamois cloth, lifting, not rubbing. The skin is smooth, a little pink. Good enough. You put everything away carefully, lock the drawer, put the key back where it belongs. The autumn comes back. The whole round of seasons that you now understand in the rhythm of service. The social seasons, the heavy dinner seasons, the quiet summer months when Lady Ashworth goes to the country, and you have 3 weeks of relative calm. In the country you walk, long walks on days when there are no duties, through fields and along lanes, without gloves, your arms in the mild September air. Nobody examining you, nobody counting anything. You come back from the country in October. The household gears back up for the winter season. The locked drawer is replenished. Toft and Sons again, Wigmore Street, brown paper parcel, eyes down. Tuesday, Mrs. Flanagan at 10, 6:45, the tweezers, the count, the cream, the mornings of December. One morning in December you're working at Lady Ashworth's temple. A few hairs there, finer than the others, requiring the most delicate touch. When she says something, "Clara, my lady," a pause. "How long have you been in service?" 7 years, my lady. And here? 3 years. She's quiet for a moment. You continue working. "My previous maid," she says, "before you. You know why she left. You know a version of this, the household gossip which you've heard and don't repeat, but you say, 'No, my lady.' She wasn't discreet," Lady Ashworth says, "not deliberately unkind, but she spoke too freely. In the kitchen. You receive this information as you receive everything, in the place where it will be stored and kept. I've never doubted your discretion," she says. "Not once in 3 years." A pause. "That's worth more to me than I can easily say." You finish the temple hairs. You apply the cream. You step back. I understand, my lady, you say. She looks at herself in the mirror. The composed, correct woman. The one who exists in drawing rooms and dinner tables and the careful social machinery of Belgravia. You'll have your own establishment some day, she says. I hope you know that. It's not a promise. It's an observation, a prediction. A thing she can see from the vantage point of a woman who has been paying attention for 3 years. I hope so, you say. You should. She stands. The blue dress today, I think. And we'll leave the hair until after breakfast. Yes, my lady. You go to get the blue dress, and so the days go. The pumice stone in the cold attic before dawn. The Gros cream on the lip. Preventive, twice weekly. The familiar precise work at the dressing table. The locked drawer and its contents. The brown paper parcels from Wigmore Street. Mrs. Flanagan on Tuesdays. The sugar preparation before important events. All of it invisible. All of it in the space between the raw material and the finished product. All of it unspeakable. All of it real. There's a thing that happens when you've been doing work like this for long enough. Intimate work. Work that exists in the gap between what people show and what people are. You stop being surprised by the gap. It's everywhere, in every house you've ever worked in every woman you've helped dress or helped prepare or helped face the world. The gap between what the world sees and what the dressing room knows. It's not false, what the world sees. Lady Ashworth is genuinely composed. Mrs. Aldridge is genuinely formidable. The women who show up to dinners and musical evenings and social calls, correctly presented, arms smooth, faces correct, they are those women. The presentation isn't a lie, but the presentation is work, and the work is invisible, and the invisibility of the work is itself the most important thing, the requirement above all requirements, that nobody should be able to see the effort, that the effort should dissolve into the result and leave no trace. You are part of that disappearing act. You make the disappearing happen. In return, you get 3 meals a day and a grey wool coat and a cracked mirror and a box under your cot. You get a locked drawer. You get you've done well, Clara on good days, and on better days you'll have your own establishment some day. You get to know everything, and knowing everything in this particular world is not nothing. The church bell is striking somewhere out in the December night. The cold has settled over London like a lid. The frost coming back, the square outside glazed and still. In the attic room, Agnes is snoring. Mary has turned toward the wall. You lie on the cot with the thin blanket pulled up. The box is under the cot. The pumice stone, the Gros, the tweezers. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock, the same. You close your eyes. The city outside goes on. The carriages returning from dinners, the late deliveries, the footsteps of the link boys, the dogs, the 1,000 concurrent dramas of 1,000,000 people living in the same impossible place. You are 22 years old. You know how to do things that nobody taught you, that nobody put in a book, that nobody writes down in any form that could be found and read. You know the gap between the world and the dressing room. You know what lives in locked drawers. You know the count of 12, the weight of fine-pointed tweezers, the exact consistency of caramel at the right temperature. You know what 3 shillings and 4pence can accomplish, and what it cannot. You know the particular relief on a proud woman's face when the sugar preparation works. You know all of this, and you will keep it, every bit of it, in the place where things are stored and kept and taken, eventually to the grave. This is the arrangement. This has always been the arrangement. The cold comes through the gap in the curtains. The city breathes. You breathe with it. tomorrow is 5 o'clock, but that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this. The cold and the dark and the weight of what you know, and the strange, complicated privilege of knowing it. The straw mattress is familiar under your body. Your legs ache pleasantly from the day's standing. Sleep is coming. You let it come. Think of all the women in London tonight, in drawing rooms in Mayfair and in attic rooms like this one, and in narrow houses in Southwark, and in the grand hotels where visitors from Edinburgh and India and Manchester and everywhere else are settling in for the night. All of them with bodies that exist in this world, with its rules and its requirements and its elaborate system of silence. Some of them are in their own locked drawer moments right now, late at night, in private, managing, attending to the things that must be attended to, using what they have. Some of them are comfortable. Some of them are in pain. All of them will get up tomorrow and do it again. This is what it means to be a woman in 1882. Not the dresses, not the social calls, not the carriages and the dinners and the gloves. This, the quiet, persistent, private work of making the world think you are effortless. The work that starts at 5 o'clock. That ends only when you sleep. Tomorrow there will be tea at 5:15, and the locked drawer at 5:30, and the careful counted work of the tweezers. Tomorrow there will be the blue-watered silk or the brown wool or whatever Lady Ashworth decides. Tomorrow there will be the 1,000 small acts that constitute a day, but that's tomorrow. Right now, the city is quiet. Or as quiet as London ever gets, which is to say not quiet at all, but a particular shade of busy that has become, over 3 years, the sound of ordinary life. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You know enough. That's not nothing. That might actually be enough. The boundary between waking and sleeping blurs. The sounds of the city fade to the background. Not gone, never gone, but receding, becoming something you hear without listening. You think of Mrs. Aldridge's face in the mirror, the flicker of something large and complicated when you said it worked. You think of Lady Ashworth counting to herself in the early morning, the audit in the triple mirror. You think of Bessie from Edinburgh packing the brown paper parcel into the trunk without reading the note. You think of the parlour maid from Manchester. You hope she found her way. You hope in some form of the thing you mean by hope, that someone eventually told her, that someone took her aside in the way someone should have taken her aside before any of it happened, and said, here is what you need to know, here is how this works, here is the box under the cot, and the key to the locked drawer, and the name of the place on Wigmore Street. That someone was kind. The kindness of giving someone the information they need to exist in the world they actually live in. This is a kindness that has no name. It doesn't appear in any of the advice columns in The Lady. It isn't written down anywhere that the people who need it can find it. It happens in the servants' hall and in the kitchen, and in the corridors of houses like this one. Whispered from woman to woman, passed along in the only way available, privately, directly, woman to woman. The way Agnes lowered her voice this morning, the way you spoke to Bessie in the kitchen, the way, once, a woman in your first house in Kensington took you aside and gave you the list. This is how it travels. This is the only way it travels. Through the silence, in the space between words, from one woman to the next, in a city that has no language for it, that has never had a language for it, that will not have a language for it for a very long time yet. Centuries will pass. The world you know will change in ways you cannot imagine and would not recognize. The corsets will go. The locked drawers will become different. their contents subject to entirely different calculations. The Toft and Sons parcels will become something you can buy at a counter without lowering your eyes, or order from a catalogue, or find in a glossy magazine between advertisements for other things entirely. The language will change. The silence will partly lift. Women will speak about these things, eventually, in ways that would shock the dressing room in Belgrave Square out of all recognition. But the work will continue. The gap between the world and the dressing room will continue. The quiet persistence of managing what must be managed, privately, carefully, with what you have, that will continue in some form. Some things don't change. The way a woman looks at herself in a mirror in the early morning, not the romantic look, not vanity, but the audit, that doesn't change. The particular quality of the work, invisible and essential and unacknowledged, that doesn't change. And the kindness of one woman telling another what she needs to know, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way sleep takes a woman who has worked since 5 a.m, who has stood all day in a warm room doing careful work with her hands, who has walked 40 minutes each way in December cold, who has carried a brown paper parcel in a bag that sat heavy on her shoulder, who has done what needed doing and done it well. Let the city outside do whatever it does. Let the drawing rooms empty. Let the carriages return. Let the locked drawers hold what they hold. Let the morning come when it comes. You've earned this. Take it. The straw mattress under you. Agnes breathing in the dark. The cold of the room, familiar now as your own heartbeat. You think one last thing before sleep takes you completely. 5 o'clock, pumice stone, left forearm, right forearm. Gauze on the lip, the box under the cot. Tomorrow, and all the days after, but not yet. Right now, just this. The dark and the quiet and the weight of everything you know, and the strange, complicated, invisible privilege of knowing it. Good night.